Hello everyone, this is Refresh, and I am here to take a look at Nissa Genesis Mage Planeswalker deck from Hour of Devastation. According to the back here, it says, Unleash Nature's Wrath. The elf planeswalker Nissa Ravane draws power from her connection to the natural world. Enlist her aid to harness primal elemental forces and summon massive creatures as you overrun your enemy's defenses. So this kind of seems like a green stompy deck. The contents say it includes a ready-to-play 60-card deck featuring a foil premium Nissa Genesis Mage Planeswalker card, 2 Hour of Devastation 15-card booster packs, a deck box, a strategy insert, and a magic quick reference card. Let's go ahead and see if that's true. Here's our foil Nissa Genesis Mage Planeswalker, a little bit bent. This is our deck box with some sweet Nissa art on it. Now, one thing interesting about this particular deck is that this is the second Nissa Planeswalker deck, and I find that a little odd considering the fact that there are several other Planeswalkers that were in Hour of Devastation, including Sama, the new Planeswalker. And so it's a bit odd that Nissa gets a second one when there are so many Planeswalkers that haven't gotten one yet. But let's take a look inside this deck box here. Here are our somewhat squished packs of Hour of Devastation. This is our quick reference guide, which tells you a little bit about playing Magic. Not a lot, but just a little. You can't really rely on this as a way to learn how to play. I guess that's why it's called a quick reference guide. It just reminds you of the turns of playing Magic and how to read your cards. Probably appropriate for Planeswalker decks, which are usually for new players. Here's our strategy insert. A little bit of information about Nissa here, a suggestion to pick up Magic duels to learn to play Magic, and learning about how to use Planeswalker cards here. A little bit of information about playing the deck here. This isn't quite a deck tech, but it does name a bunch of cards that you're going to be using and thinking about how to run your strategy, which is basically a ramp deck. I still wish that there was a lot more information. I like this artwork and all, but there's so much wasted space on this strategy insert that could really just go more in depth with what all these specific cards are supposed to be doing. There's a little bit of information here on boosting the deck, and it's not especially useful. It just kind of tells you the most basic information, which is to look for cards that do what these cards do. But it would be nice if this went as far as to name cards that you might want to look for, instead of this really generic statement of looking for artifacts and green and blue cards that make mana or get lands and awesome cards that cost a lot of mana. How do you determine what's awesome? But here's a deck list. So you can see everything in here. It is a blue and green deck. Heavy in blue, but with a little bit of green. And then there's a little bit of story about Nissa and a bunch of advertisements. Now let's take a look at the cards in the deck itself. One of the rares that we have is Reason to Believe, which is one of these fancy Aftermath cards. So you have a Scry 3 on the Reason side, which is, I guess, not bad for 1 mana. And then you have Believe on the other side, which if you cast it straight after, you can actually make sure that it is a creature card, which will let you just stick it straight on the battlefield, which is kind of nice. It's not an amazing card, but it's okay. The other rare that comes in this deck is the Bounty of the Luxa, which basically gives you every other turn you get an extra card, or you get extra mana, which I guess isn't bad. It's card advantage half the time and a little bit more ramp the other half. Nissa's signature rare that searches for her also lets you grab additional cards, including a forest and a card named Brambleweft Behemoth, which I believe might be one of Nissa's other spells, and searches them up. So this is just a pure search card and card advantage, which I guess isn't bad, especially if you still are looking for these cards. And you get Nissa as well. You get 2 of those. Nissa's uncommon here appears to be Avid Reclaimer, which is a mana dork. For 2 and a green, you get a 2/2 where you can tap them to add green or blue to your mana pool, and if you control a Nissa Planeswalker, you gain 2 life. This is very much in keeping with Nissa's theme as a ramp deck. And then Nissa's signature common is the Brambleweft Behemoth, which costs 4, a green and a green, and gets you a 6/6 trample. You get 4 of them, and it again is reasonably in keeping with Nissa's theme as a ramp deck. You have a payoff here in the Brambleweft Behemoth to all the ramp that you're doing. That's the deck. I'm going to sleeve these up, play them with its sparring partner, and I'll be back to let you know what I think. So I've had a moment to play with this deck. I played it against its Hour of Devastation Planeswalker partner, Nicol Bolas. I've played it against the challenge decks from the Theros block. And the gist of this deck, just looking at the cards available in its card pool, is that it is a ramped deck. So its goal is, starting on turn 3, to play creatures or play spells that help this deck produce even more mana than its opponent, and then with that mana play its high drop spells, and then hopefully win the game off the back of those, because everything down here is not going to do a whole lot. In addition to those spells at the very top, Nissa's deck also provides a little bit of extra card advantage and mana sinks in the River Hoopas, which can use 5 mana to gain you life and draw cards, as well as the Aftermath cards, which appears to be this deck's signature mechanic in the Spring to Minds and the Reason to Believes. How well does this deck fare as a ramp deck? Well, I'm not terribly impressed with the payoffs. The Bramblewolf Behemoths are just 6/6s with trample, which, I mean, are fine. Everybody likes a Colossal Dreadmaw here and there, but aside from the card's ability to be tutored by the Nissa's Encouragement spell, which is Nissa's signature tutor spell, it's not terribly impressive. The Angler Drakes are much better because they at least have an enter the battlefield effect and can fly over your opponent's creatures, but it would have been nice if there were at least one rare for this deck to ramp towards, something that has a lot more of a splash, aside from Nissa herself, of course, which, granted, she plays well with the rest of the deck in giving you the capacity to attack with your big creatures and then untap, and also gives you more mana to be able to cast more big creatures. But again, there's not a whole lot here. Once you're ramping, you have 7 cards that you can search for, and that's about it. And so you're kind of just left hoping that you have a place to spit all your mana to draw into one of your win conditions or the Nissa's Encouragement to get there. And then once you get into it, even then your win conditions aren't especially exciting to play. The 2 rares of this deck are Bounty of the Luxa, which doubles as both ramp and card advantage. It lets you draw cards every other turn, and then it ramps you every other turn. And Reason, which gives you the ability to scry, and then for its Aftermath from the graveyard, look at the top card of your library and then put it onto the battlefield if it's a creature. So you might be able to cheat a creature into play. But with so many 3-drops in the deck, and not a lot in the way of payoffs, 6 creatures, your odds of being able to find such a creature isn't very high. And so typically what you're going to end up with is playing one of these 3-drops as the creature that you cheat to play, which isn't all that impressive because most of these 3-drops don't really do much in terms of being able to win. In fact, the Prowling Cheetahs are mostly a type of ersatz removal because it can jump into the battlefield and then trade with a creature. The only creatures here that I feel have some interesting utility, aside from the River Hoopa, which is a good mana sink, are the Aerial Guides, which let you fly over with your big creatures. Aside from that, I feel like the deck is just a little bit lacking in terms of payoff for what it does do really well, which is provide you with a lot of mana. And a lot of times while I was playing this game, I felt like, yes, I have a lot of mana, but what the heck do I do with it? So it does work, even if it's not exceptional and it's not exciting. The other disappointing thing about this deck is that it really doesn't do much to highlight its real mechanic, which is Aftermath. There are exactly 3 cards with Aftermath, and then there's nothing else that really screams that this is an Hour of Devastation deck. The 3 cards are nice, don't get me wrong. I like Spring even better than the rare because it lets you ramp and then you can draw cards off of that mana that you ramped, which is much more interesting than Reason to Believe, when you might be able to hit one of these 6-drops, but mostly you're going to hit 3-drops. But as such, this is perhaps the least interesting deck in terms of being able to capture the feel of the set that it came from, even though it does its game plan of ramping pretty well. But as it is really the first ramp deck available in these Planeswalker decks, it's not a bad choice if that's the type of strategy that you are drawn towards. Make a lot of mana and then play big fat creatures soon. Then it might be a deck that you might want to check out. If you have had any experience with this deck, let me know what your thoughts are about it in the comments below. If this video was helpful to you, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. This is Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.